Hey everybody, here's a quick video. I always say quick, it's not going to be that quick. Going over the slides on Unit 2 planes and our plan for that. I am in the studio, so once again, if there's a loud truck that goes by, I'm just going to power through. If somebody comes in the shop, maybe I'll pause, talk to them, whatever. There may be distractions, but yeah, we'll truck through, we'll get it done. But let me just jump right into talking about this week we are starting Unit 2, going over planes. So yeah, we just finished last week the unit going over lines in space, and we used wire and bamboo to create a sculpture that has lines moving through space. Sorry, I was just making sure things were recording. Yeah, it has lines moving through space, creating forms, creating an actual sense of depth and space, which is the idea of mass and form in 3D. So yeah, that was line, and now we're that's the most basic thing. It's we learned line and 2D design, or 2D design first as well. So now the second element we usually learn in 2D design is shape. And so now we're going to translate, from line in space to shapes in space. And these shapes in space, that are not necessarily all three dimensions, just a flat shape, in 3D are called planes. So shapes in space are called planes, okay? And in this unit, we are going to become paper engineers. That's what they call it when you mess with making pop-ups or kinds of mechanisms with paper. I know many of you may have practiced origami and sort of paper folding techniques, and that's a form of paper engineer, but we're specifically going to do pop-ups. Some of that origami type stuff might come in handy, but we're going to learn some new techniques, new to most of us probably, but maybe you have done some pop-ups, but we'll see. So anyway, first let's kind of preface again with what is a plane. Planes in a 3D object, they are 3D objects that have length and width, but only minimal depth. So they appear to be just a floating shape in space without any depth. Obviously, they have some depth. Even a piece of paper actually has real depth. It is a three-dimensional thing. It's just so minimal, it appears to not have it. So it's almost like it's just a shape floating in space with only length and width. So length, width, minimal depth. You can think of a sheet of wood that's really thin. Obviously, thicker sheets of wood have some actual depth, but a thin sheet of wood, you can think of sheet metal, or you can think of course, paper, which is what we're going to do. You can use planes, pointing different directions, attached in different ways to make planar art. It is mostly angular and uses these flat sections with only very few curves, if any. Honestly, when we talk about planar art, there's really not too many curves at all, except maybe around the edge of something like this shape here. Planes aren't just, in these we can see it's all very flat planes, constructed so you can see their flatness. You can also, make planes meet at different edges so that they create a fully developed, 3D object length, width, and depth. And the planes describe the flat surface that is, the outer surface of that shape. So plane can also describe the flat surface of an object. Any object can be turned into a series of planes by thinking of changes in direction and light. So, we see that objects fall, or light falls differently on objects, and, we just change the angle of a plane, or set up multiple planes next to each other so that it shows what would be a curve, on an object as a series. You all kind of, if you did bamboo, you learned how to make a curve with a series of small straight ones. This is the same idea with a series of straight, flat shapes instead of just lines. Okay, so you can see, and any object can be turned into a series of planes, that just construct the shape by changing direction in kind of strategic ways, kind of flattening object out. You can almost think of it like polygonal shapes that video game designers have to work with to get their shapes, with minimal ways of putting out information. They can just put out certain shapes, and fill them with the same color or value. But if they set them up next to each other, it kind of gives you the idea of this round, full object. And of course, you can just use planes to make kind of abstract or non-objective shapes as usual. Sorry, you can probably hear that giant truck passing by again. So anyway, where are we going to take this idea of pop-ups? How are we going to utilize it? We are going to make pop-ups. We're going to use paper. We're going to be paper engineers, and we're going to use the paper to make planes that will, construct a pop-up pamphlet or card. Okay, so we will use planes using paper. We'll create planes using paper, and with the paper, we'll make pop-ups. Repeating myself there for some reason. Anyway, so getting started talking about different types of pop-ups. I'm going to show you or link a video to a video I made kind of testing out some ideas around pop-ups and talking about these things with actual pieces moving in front of you. But I've also linked a YouTube channel that has a ton of great information and tutorials on how to make pop-ups. But in any case, let me start with some things that are kind of pop-up-y, but not really true pop-up mechanisms in the way that we are looking for. You can kind of use them, but you don't want to use them a lot. First off, we have counterfolds. This is the most basic way of making a pop-up. You take the same plane, you fold it in half, and then you cut a part of it, and then you fold it in the other direction, right? So as you go to fold the big thing in half, it moves inward, and sort of gives you the shape. So you can see they're just simple like cuts and slits and folds that then construct, a shape moving inward. They can be diagonal, which I'll go over in a second. It's called a converging fold, or they can be parallel cuts, which is a parallel fold. We'll go over that again in a second. But here's the thing. This is why these are not true mechanisms. They're simple ways to make things pop out, but they're not true pop-up mechanisms because since they are part of the same plane as the actual outside of the card or shape, it's called a base, that we're using, when it is totally flat outward, it is flat. The pop-up doesn't pop up if the card is folded out all the way. They only work at 90 degrees. For the most part. That's kind of what keeps them from being true pop-up mechanisms. Now, they are good for decoration. I will allow maybe like one of these to work its way into your projects if, because it's just so easy to make. It's such a great decoration, but I'll allow it if you place it into another base, which means you're going to have like multiple pages for your base. You can either have a double-sided base or a two-page base, or you can stick it into another pop-up that makes a 90 degrees. So as you'll see in a minute, when we make a true pop-up, there's some part of it that sticks up even when the base is flat, and that part that sticks up creates a 90-degree angle, which then you could stack one counterfold into as one of your mechanisms. So it's kind of like you can use it as a pop-up on a pop-up or make a multiple page pop-up so that these work. Okay, so if you have questions about that, you can always message me. It's a little trickier, but it is kind of a neat trick if you can add this onto another pop-up. Okay, another pop-up that's not really a pop-up, and this one even more so. This is not really at all a true pop-up. These the counterfolds have a little bit of argument because they move when the page moves. But a zigzag float, which I don't know the true word for, that's what I call it, a float, using a zigzag or accordion fold. It is it's great for decoration, but it doesn't move or do anything depending on how you move the page. So it's not really a mechanism. It is basically, you take you make a cutout of a shape that you want to float above the plane of the base. You're going to make another plane that floats, but rather than having it span the gutter, which is required for a true mechanism, you can just take a little like skinny piece of paper, anything that's like smaller than your cutout, you fold it back and forth like in this image here, and then you glue it to the back of your cutout and then to the base. So it's like a little spring, right? And it's like sticks out. It's like a little, what do they call those? Slinky type thing, right? It makes the cutout that you made sort of float above the page, but it's not moving at all. It's not responding to the opening of the page. So while it is a cool way to make a 3D plane, right? Give it some depth, give it some space. It sticks out. It's a great decoration. I recommend adding it to your piece. It will not be considered a mechanism. It is just a decorative element. Okay. They don't cross the gutter or gully, so they are not true pop-ups. So what is a true pop-up? A true pop-up, as I said, means that when you open it to a full 180 degrees, it actually moves and changes shape throughout that whole process. And when you are done opening your base or your card into a full 180 degrees, the pop-up is still standing. It doesn't flatten out as you open further. It may change shape, but it doesn't go totally flat. It sticks up. Okay, so just to cover again, the card that we are going to make sort of the page, right, that folds open in order to, for it to be a true pop-up. The little booklet is called a base, right? And so, yeah, as we open that base and we open it all the way, oh yeah, by the way, when the base is closed, it should just be a triangle. It should be totally flat like a plane. But when we open it, all these things pop up. Okay, so it's just like a greeting card or something when it's closed. But then as we open it, the true 180-degree mechanisms pop up. In order to make this happen, right, for things to truly pop up when they're totally open, it does have to cross a gutter or gully, and it has to be attached with tabs or glue. Okay, so it can't be made out of the same plane as the actual base. So that's one of those key things. Kind of, yeah, like on the counterfolds, it's made of the same piece, just cutting it, making things stick out or in. But for a true mechanism to work, it has to be made as a separate object and then attached using tabs, which is just like an extra little flap of paper that you add on to anything you're going to stick, and then glued down. Or you can also, this is a little trickier, and it's only necessary if you're going to have like moving parts and all this stuff, but you can make like a double-sided base, right? So it's like a card with two layers, and then cut slits or slots on the inside on the inside layer of that double-sided card, and then you can just put tabs into that. That works, but it's a little tricky, so only get into that if you really need to. It's probably mentioned in the YouTube channel, or the pop-up channel YouTube link that I give you. But for the most part, all the pop-ups that I've been doing, they're just tabs that are glued down. Okay. Yeah, so these are true pop-up mechanisms. And that first thing this little point that it needs to cross the gutter or gully is the first of our three major principles of true pop-ups. Okay. So true pop-up mechanisms must cross the gutter or gully. Every pop-up mechanism must cross a gutter or gully. That means the same thing, gutter, gully. Just I always say gutter. The guy that I give you the YouTube link to, he says gully. So I include both. But the first gully is the spine of your base card, right? So that little flap, that booklet that you're making, the first gutter is the spine of that booklet, okay? Now, that's principle one. Principle number two is that every pop-up must be balanced. And this is a tricky idea because it doesn't mean that it's the same on both sides, but the attachment size and the attachment angles have to balance each other out. Even if they're not the same, you can't just like stick, if you need something to pop up and be uneven at the end, once you've got the book fully opened, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can just stick it anywhere willy-nilly. You have to find the place where that base is going to end up. So you can usually do that by gluing one side and then closing things, and like having glue on a tab that's sort of floating, and as you close it, it'll find the place where it needs to be so that it sticks. You'll see that in the videos that the YouTube channel has. But in any case, essentially, it does have to be balanced, but it has to be in the right way. It's not necessarily that it has to be the same on both sides, although that does usually work. But you can make asymmetrical pop-ups and things if you just make sure that the size of the attachments is correctly balanced, and the angle and all those things. So the angle, more so than the position or length, has to be balanced. Okay. Principle number three, every pop-up creates another gully. That's the thing I was talking about earlier, is that you can, like add a counterfold, the 90-degree pop-up, to another pop-up, because when another pop-up pops up, it's creating new angles. It has often a gutter itself in the middle, but it also creates those 90s with whatever's helping it stick up. So those gutters and gullies, every pop-up usually has multiple new gullies that are created. You can check that out in the video that I made. I talk about, I kind of point out what that means, what that looks like. And then you can think about, when you're designing your final pop-up after you've done practice, how can you stack pop-ups into those new gullies that are made by other pop-ups? Okay, so those are the three principles. Every pop-up must cross a gully, every pop-up must be balanced, and every pop-up must create another gully. Now the word pop-up sounds weird. Okay, no, different types of folds. Let me cover this really quickly. He covers it in his first video. I'm sure I covered it in my video too, but converging folds versus parallel folds. Essentially, when you're working with these shapes that are angles, like angular things like mouths or V shapes that you want to come, really pretty much any V fold, it is what's considered a converging fold, which is basically you can make diagonal lines, but they at some point will meet at that final gutter. Okay, that's an important thing for learning about asymmetrical pop-ups too, is that you make these things so that they are off center, or not off center. You make them so that they are at an angle, but then eventually they all have to meet back up at the gutter or gully. That gutter or gully is just pretty much the most important thing to really get your head around. So they can work at angles outward, but they meet back at the gutter, or you can do a parallel fold, which is things can be off center and not pointed back to the gutter, but in order to do that, they have to be parallel to the gutter. Okay, so that's this image here. See, the converging folds, all these angles work outward, but they point back to that original gutter, right? Everything ends back at the gutter. Versus a parallel fold, you can see these don't all end or line up with the gutter, but they are in line with the gutter. They are parallel to it. Right? If you don't know what the word parallel means, go back to Algebra 1 or geometry and make sure you're checking those vocab words. Yeah, but you can stack things. It's just kind of neat to know you can be at an angle, but it meets back at the gutter, or you can be off center, but it has to be parallel to the gutter. Everything's based on the gutter. Okay, I'm going to just talk about one basic type of fold, and I make it in my video, just showing you it's kind of the first like step outside of a simple counter fold or just like a little floaty attachment, and that is the V fold. Okay, V folds are basically just making another, you make your base, right? And then you make another folding card that's small enough to fit inside of it. And then you add little tabs to the feet, right? Like right here, you add little tabs and you fold it. And then, then you attach those tabs at different angles so that it pops up in different ways. It can pop up at a right angle, it can pop up at an acute angle or an obtuse angle, or you can pop up asymmetrical, however you want to do it. There are 5 different kinds. Those that I just said, right angle, acute, obtuse, and then asymmetrical, which basically just means, like this one here, where the gutter of the new pop-up is not, it's not the same on both sides. You can do that, but again, you have to make sure it's balanced. Or you can do a pointed V-fold, which is basically taking one of these other V-folds, the right angle, acute, obtuse, whatever, and cutting the top of it so that it comes to points. That's an important one to note because, if you're making a pop-up that's supposed to look like a church, you can cut that top, right? It doesn't really have anything to do with the mechanism. You can just cut it as a design element to make it look like a steeple, to make it look like a valley. You can cut the top so that it looks like little trees or whatever. But essentially, the pointed V-fold is like a good way of thinking about you can decorate, that top edge or change it so that when it pops up, it looks like something else, okay? In the video, I go over how to make a right angle V-fold, and I show you the asymmetrical one, but there are all kinds of videos on the pop-up channel on YouTube, which I'm about to give you the link for. But yeah, so the most basic way to start is the V-fold. I don't want you to just do 5 different V-folds. I like you to try different things so you can add more complex pop-ups to your repertoire in this practice. But yeah, the other basics, other things you can learn to make. The box mechanism, the parallel fold. This is the box. This is the parallel fold. The floating plane is like having a table or desk or book or something that's popping up off the page. The zigzag fold is this here where it makes a W or an M or any kind of number of shapes by just changing the angle of the paper. Then, of course, you have the spiral. That's actually super easy and not even that true of a mechanism, but might be a nice decorative mechanism to add, or pseudo mechanism. And then plus you have, of course, pull tabs and moving parts. All of these and more are covered in the link to the pop-up channel, YouTube channel. But remember, you're going to do 5 of these. Okay, so I guess I'm telling you now, you're going to do 5 of these for practice. I'll show you that slide in a second. And you're going to just be able to look through all those YouTube videos of how to do them. But remember, on the final, you're going to do multiple pop-ups in the same book, so you can stack pop-ups on pop-ups and you have them interact with each other. You're going to have multiple pop-ups in that book, but on this, you're just going to do one pop-up per little base that you're going to make. I'll get to that in a minute, but in any case, oh yeah, here it is. Essentially, your practice mechanisms, you're going to make 5 of them. Each of them is in its own base or little booklet. So 5 different booklets, 1 mechanism each. Okay, so 5 practice pop-up mechanisms on separate bases. If you want to practice more than 5, you can put multiple in one card, but think about that, especially if you want to practice like the little zigzag fold or the little cutout, like that X that I had that sort of popped up and floating. If you want to practice that, just add it into one of your 5 separate bases. Yeah, so on and so forth. I will let you do 1 counterfold, but for the practice of 5, but just kind of think about different things that you can try. Each card, when closed, should be at least 4 by 4. Okay, so that's I guess about this size square, 4 by 4 square, which means you cut an 8 by 4 piece of paper and then fold it in half. Okay, so it's a 4 by 4 square at the end. Make sure you don't fold it in half long ways, because then you just end up with an 8-inch by 2-inch book. That's all. I'm just kidding. Yeah, 4-inch by 4 card, 8 by 4 sheet folded in half. Or honestly, what I did for all of my mechanisms right here is I took a regular sheet of cardstock paper that is 9 by 12, or it's actually 8.5 by 11, and I just cut it in half, hamburger style. So I had essentially an 8.5 by 5.5 wide sheet. And then I folded that in half and ended up with a 4.2 by 5.5 little rectangle, basically a perfect little greeting card size. So that's a regular sheet of paper, cut in half hamburger style, then folded in half again. Okay. So yeah, you can do that. That's the easiest way to do it. Or you can cut 4 by 8 strips, fold in half, whatever. But yeah, make 5 true mechanisms. Only 1 of those can be a counterfold. Okay. I want them to span the gutter. I want them to do things. If you add a little zigzag, like floaty fold, that is not one of your 5. But if you add 1 counterfold where it's actually a part of the base, I'm okay with that for practice. I'll call that a true mechanism, sort of, even though it doesn't open to 90, or it doesn't open to 180. It's only 90, so it's not really, but it at least spans the gutter, so it's something. But yeah, practice decorating, practice different things. And you're going to do all of this practice, watch my video, but the main practice you're going to get, or the main tutorials, because it would take me hours and hours to make videos, which you guys don't want to watch just me necessarily in making these mechanisms. There's just so many. I think he has like nearly 100 different mechanism videos, video tutorials, different things that you can do. He shows books, like famous books that are like really popular pop-ups that have these mechanisms. And really, it's actually pretty simple how you can stack these mechanisms up and get different effects. And yeah, these different books that he shows just kind of guide you through some, or may inspire different ideas, but then he actually breaks down the simple mechanisms that make it. So I would go to his page. You could watch the first video if you want, but I'll be honest, my video, which I want you to view on Canvas, the demo video, it talks about supplies, demonstrations, some tips and things that I learned. It's pretty similar to his first video, if I'm being totally honest. But if you go to his YouTube channel, there are just hundreds of other videos, and you can find any mechanism that you want to try. Just go to that video and watch his tutorial and try that. Okay. He has a lot of nuance, especially like the parallel folds. They're harder than you think, especially if you want like things to be off center or whatever. But yeah, you view his videos to find the tutorials, or you can of course ask me questions, send me messages. I can help the best I can. Like I said, the video that I made covers supplies, but just to go over them again, you're going to need cardstock paper, OBS, to make this. The most simple kind is 110-pound index paper. It comes in great big stacks at Walmart for like $6. Okay. There are smaller packs that are 65-pound cardstock paper, but if I'm being honest, those are still like $4 or $5, and it's like way less sheets, and it's not as strong. But it's kind of up to you. 65-pound works. 110-pound is better. and it's like 110 pound, 199 metric, and then 65 pound is 176 metric, right? So you kind of have to uh, double check and make sure you're getting the right poundage. But yeah, the same as index cards is a way to do this. And then you're going to need scissors, any old pair of scissors, an X-Acto blade, scissors or an X-Acto blade or a box cutter. X-Acto blades are like this. They're essentially just box cutters that have like better handles and they're more delicate. Big box cutter will do the trick. The whole point is that it has like a razor sharp blade on the end, or honestly, scissors can do. You can't get as detailed with scissors, making spirals or cutout shapes, but you can pretty much do the job. Then you're going to need stick glue, Elmer's glue, or rubber cement. Now, Elmer's glue, let me tell you, you're going to need to spread it really, really thin. You don't want a bunch of Elmer's glue squeezing out everywhere. I use stick glue for all of mine. It's a great place to start, but it's not archival. It's not going to last a super long time, but it does. You can work really fast with it. I had a good time, and my stuff's holding up today for sure. I tear one apart in the video, and you can see it's only been an hour or so, and it actually tears. So it holds up pretty good. And then rubber cement, I don't recommend it if you haven't used it, but it works super well, but it's not like a regular glue. You actually have to coat both sides and hold it for a certain amount of time with all this like pressure. Then it holds like super forever, but it's weird how you have to do both sides and everything. So think about it. Yeah, you paint it and then let it dry, I think, too. And then I don't know, you have to watch another YouTube video on how to use rubber cement. In any case, rulers, probably not necessary for your practice mechanisms, but except for maybe if you cut the 4x4 cards, but it may be important at the end or for the final, getting the more exact detailed cutouts. Then you're going to also need something to fold. As you'll see in my video, when you crease something, if you just use your finger, it's just kind of often a rough crease. It's not super exact. And it just doesn't fold as neatly and as well. You can also score, with the dull side of your scissors or something. That's just like making a mark so the fold's easier. But at the end of the day, your best thing is to use some sort of folder. And professional, like serious paper engineers, they buy these things called bone folders, which is a really hard piece of plastic for creasing paper. But you can use a Sharpie. You can use, this is a clay stick tool that I have right here. It has this kind of rounded soft edge that's great for creasing. Or you can just use the back of your pair of scissors. That's what I've done for years and years. Anything that doesn't cut it or make a mark, but actually reinforces that crease is great. So yeah, think about it. Some kind of folder. You'll see. Go watch my video and you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, last slide. All of this is due in 1 week. Okay, so I posted it yesterday. It's going to be due on Tuesday. So actually 6 days from the day that I'm posting this video. I posted these slides yesterday. But in any case, you are going to have a week to practice these 5 different mechanisms. And then from there, you'll have about a week and a half, 2 weeks to do your final. Okay. Now, I also should mention this accordion fold I talk about in the video. It kind of sucks. It's a good place to start. I guess it's good practice, but I don't know. Be careful with it. Just saying. Now that I'm looking at this picture. But in any case, you're going to do 5 separate pop-ups. You're going to upload 5 separate photos of these pop-ups to the Canvas assignment by the date posted there, which is 1 week away. If this semester is just like past semesters, or I'll remake the video. In any case, yeah, it'll be due on next Tuesday at midnight. All that stuff. Watch my video going over these slides. This is if you're looking at the slides and you haven't watched this video, it's telling you to watch it. And then look at the supplies tips video, and of course, view the pop-up channel YouTube link. But yeah, get it all done. 5 different mechanisms. You can use the YouTube to find exactly what you want. You don't have to just copy the ones that I've done. But yeah, and then start thinking about already how you're going to turn this into a final like brochure. I'll give you the theme later, but think about how you can do that. And there will be a sketch next week. That'll be a really quick turnaround, like 2 days to do your sketch. And then that way you have like a full week or maybe a little more to finish your actual final pop-up brochure, pamphlet, card, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so that more than that more than covers everything I needed to get done today. So let me end that, and I will post this. Thanks for watching. Email me if you have any questions, and I will, other than that, look forward to seeing your pop-ups next week. Thank you.